Today me and my cat are going to be reacting to an IMR Scary Tales video. This is about 20 minutes or 23 minutes? 20 minutes. 20 and a half minutes. So this is going to be a good video. So 3 creepy horror stories animated, so it doesn't necessarily say they're true, so alright. It's an IMR Scary Tales video. To be honest, I do like our IMR Scary Tales videos in the last video that I reacted to of his. I was kind of thinking, yeah, like, I like his videos and stuff, but it's kind of like they're so long, but I actually get like really into them and stuff, so. And this is not a specific genre, it's just horror, right? It's just like creepy, right? So like it's not like sleepover or dating horror stories or school horror stories or high school, you know what I mean? It's just all, it could literally be anything. My cat's trying to escape, so it looks like she's not reacting no more. A minute into the video, she's like, I'm out. And not even a minute in. Okay, well, that's rude, but I'll let you go. Right, joke's on her, she's trapped up. Fuck. She's trapped in this room for 20 minutes. Because I'm not letting her out. Please do not go for my camera. Please don't. No? Okay, good. And without further ado, let's get right into this video. This should be a good one. Again, it's nothing specific, so she was possessed.
I was 4 years old when this story took place.
We lived in a very mundane apartment complex that only had 3 floors, but that didn't bother me, as I stayed home most of the time.
Okay.
One afternoon, I was home alone with my maid.
How old are you?
Cooking lunch for me.
Like 4?
After lunch, she told me that she had to go work at someone's house that evening, and that she didn't know when she'd be back.
So
I remember
me home alone
feeling
when I'm like
extremely
2?
sad, and that must have been evident on my face because she responded to my looks by saying, "You can come with me if you like. It's just a few doors down, so it's not much of a walk." My eyes lit up when she said this. The following evening, we arrived at the house. I could hear the television from where I was. My maid knocked on the door, but no one answered. When she knocked again, a young woman opened the door. She was sort of a partner for my maid who would work with her majority of the time. We stepped inside, and immediately my eyes alighted to a very porky-looking woman with disheveled hair lying down on the couch holding a television remote. To my left, 2 young boys sat in front of each other, busying themselves with toy blocks. My maid asked me to play with them, so I obliged. I sat down beside them as my maid and her friend strode out of the living room and into the kitchen. This is where the story starts to take a turn. 10 minutes after I sat down, I heard the woman suddenly gasp for air whilst clutching her chest. My heart sank and the blocks dropped from my hand. My maid and her friend rushed in and saw the woman's face turning blue. She kept croaking the words, "Big man! Big man!" Just then, a dark shadow materialized beside her. He was so tall that he stretched up to the ceiling. I was so scared I couldn't even think straight. The 2 boys next to me looked just as shocked as I was. Then, the woman fell silent and her eyes clamped shut. It was silent for almost a full minute before her eyes shot open again. And I swear, I thought her pupils had turned just a shade darker. I wish I wasn't there for what happened next. The woman began laughing like a maniac.
Oh my god.
Wide eyes darted in their sockets from one end of the room to the next. She kept puffing up her chest and writhing around like a terrified worm. My maid stumbled back, hit the edge of the couch, and fell to the floor, throwing her hands behind to catch her balance. Meanwhile, her friend sprinted towards the balcony behind us, slid the sliding glass door open, and proceeded to throw herself out of it in fear. This triggered my instincts, so I jumped up, and so did the 2 boys beside me. We tried our best to stop her from falling over. My maid rushed in, and together we hurled her backwards. My maid then grabbed her friend by the shirt, pulled her close, and said, "If we are going to get through this, we are going to together!" We re-entered the living room, and by this point, the woman was on her knees with her arms above her head. She began waving them madly. My maid opened the door left,
I would not be able to handle
leaving her petrified friend behind with us. The woman began taunting her, her eyes open wider than ever. Moments later, my maid arrived with 2 people, an older man and a younger woman. The woman took one look at the man, and her whole face fell as she threw him the blankest stare. Then, she began to growl as he approached her, and shook her head violently as if to say no. The man took the remote and turned on the TV. He played around with the channels until he found one where a priest was reading a Bible verse. The woman fell to the floor and thrashed around wildly. The man bravely walked up to her and placed a hand over her forehead, then began threatening the spirit so that it would leave. After what felt like forever, the woman fell silent again. The man then turned to my maid and her friend, who were now shaking uncontrollably, and said, "I have to spend the night here. I can't leave this woman alone with her kids. You have to leave now." The 2 women didn't say anything, but merely shook their heads. My maid then did something which I felt to be extremely stupid. She volunteered to spend the night with him, and our friend reluctantly agreed, looking at her as if she had gone mad.
Yeah, she has gone mad.
I had to spend the night too, since I didn't like sleeping alone.
Well, thanks a lot, bitch. I didn't want to be there.
And the next morning when I awoke, the house felt quiet. Just then, my maid walked into the living room with that same friend of hers and stood a few inches away from the couch. They began silently arguing with each other over something I couldn't quite comprehend.
Probably saying I
When the
didn't want to spend the
argument
night
was
here.
over, my maid was the first one to step up. She tapped the woman on the shoulder and the woman opened her eyes again. Something about her eyes told me that she had returned to her normal self, but I wasn't all convinced of this theory. The woman sat up and looked at my maid in the eye. My maid then proceeded to ask her, "Ma'am, would you like some coffee?" The woman took a few seconds to respond, but when she did, it wasn't her voice that we all heard, but a deep, gruff voice, like that of a man. It echoed off the walls of the house as she said, "No."
Oh my god.
A few years later, when my
I would
maid
leave.
recalled that incident,
I'm never
to me, she
I'm never
then
coming
told me
back.
something that chilled me to the bone.
I'm never coming back. I'm
She
done.
told me that a few months before that happened, her husband had assaulted and killed their 13-year-old daughter right before drowning himself in the bathtub.
Oh my
To
god.
this day, I will never understand why she didn't just move out of that house.
Right?
I'm 15 years old now, and that experience still haunts me to this day.
I bet. So she got possessed by that person, I guess, the one that ghost house. So this is like more.
I'll start off by saying
Paranormal.
that I'm not sure if I
More
believe
like-
in the paranormal. But to be honest, I'm not sure how else to explain what I saw.
My cat's in
A
the
little
key now.
background information. I lived in a part of London which during World War II was bombed by the Nazis. So some of the flats and houses were destroyed, and therefore were rebuilt later on. This experience took place when I was 7 to 9 years old. I'm not 100% sure how old I was exactly, but when we moved into the flat on the top floor of a 2-story building, I was excited that we were moving into a new place. It was much bigger than where we used to live. I picked out my room, and we spent the rest of the day decorating the place to make it
You best
ours.
close those windows.
You know, the usual stuff. Nothing really happened for about a year, but in that time, my older half-brother moved in with us, and my little brother was born. It was around this time that things were starting to get weird. I started getting this feeling like I was being watched. I was never really a socially active child.
Those windows
And
are
my
open.
parents were never really comfortable with
curtains.
me playing downstairs with the other kids, as they didn't know any of them, and they wouldn't have a clear view of me from the flat. So I would usually play by myself at home a lot. It started out when I was playing on my own. I would get this strange feeling in whichever room I was in, but upstairs is where I felt it the most. Sometimes I would see the outline of a person in the corner of my eye, but when I would turn to look, they would be gone. Sometimes I would look thinking that it was my parents or my older brother checking
Why
in
the curtains
on me,
open still,
or
dummy?
maybe playing a trick. But again, no one was ever there.
And the door's open.
I would never hear anybody approaching either. At first I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe one of my brother's horror games had scared me more than I thought.
Yeah, okay.
After a few months of this, I was laying in my
Few
bed
months
trying to
of
get
that?
to sleep. I turned over and faced my door. That was when I caught a glimpse of a head, quickly ducking out of sight behind the door frame. I was frozen in fear, but my heart began thumping in my ears,
There
and
we
I
go.
began breathing heavily. After a few seconds, I got
I
up
don't
and
know
ran
what I
to
would
my
do.
parents' room, which was across the hallway. I had tears in my eyes and told them that I saw something staring into my room. My mom, in her groggy state, said that I just had a bad dream and I should go back to sleep. I told her I didn't want to, because I was too scared. I kept glancing behind me to the doorway of my parents' room, because from there you can see into my room. But of course, I could see nothing. After my mom had woken up a bit, she could see that I was clearly panicked, and she decided to let me sleep in their room for the night. The next morning, I tried to forget all about the incident, and I was starting to believe that my mom was right, and it was just most likely a nightmare. But for the
Alright.
next few nights, I was too scared to face my door while I was in bed, and I wasn't sleeping
Just in
well.
case, yeah.
I still had that overwhelming feeling of being watched, but it was worse now. It was almost like something was staring at the back of my head. After a couple of months of not seeing anything, I kind of forgot about it, and started sleeping better as well.
Good.
That all came to an end when
Oh
I
my
woke up
God.
in a cold sweat. I had had a nightmare or something. So, of course, I made my way to my parents' room. My mom was too tired to argue with me, and my dad had already left in the early hours of the morning for his job. So she agreed to let me sleep in the bed with her, as I laid there trying to go back to sleep. I pulled up the covers and glanced at the door, and there it was again. The same figure that I had seen before, except this time, it lingered. I was too scared to say anything. The best way I can describe it is that it was very tall. There was only about a foot of space from the top of its head to the door frame. It had long fingers, and it was all black. It had no discerning features. However, once my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see a long, thin smile form where its face would have been. It was a truly disturbing sight to behold. I then blinked, and just like that, it was gone. This time I could feel myself having a panic attack. I didn't know what to do, so I pulled the covers over my head, moved over to my mom so my back was against hers, and tightly shut my eyes. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, my mom was waking me up for school. I told her what happened, and again she suggested that I just had a bad dream. I know that she was just trying to calm me down by trying to downplay it, but now I wasn't sure. For the next couple of weeks, I was too scared to sleep on my own. I refused to sleep in my room even with a night light or a lamp on. My parents gave in and said that I could sleep in their room for a while. I felt safer with my parents. However, at some point, I woke up one night and I needed to turn over. And as I did, I glanced at the doorway, and this time, I saw long skinny fingers curling around the doorframe, slowly followed by its head. That's when I realized it was peering around the door. Again, just like last time.
Do you not have your doors closed when you sleep? Close the door, that's all I gotta do.
And its head was gone. I felt a small bit of relief as soon as I noticed the fingers were still there. And then, shortly after, the head came back, slowly peering from around the doorframe. Every time I would blink, the head would move away, but then would come back. Terrified, I again pulled the covers over my head and shut my eyes,
You
breathing
should be on the
heavily,
other side of the bed.
just trying to
And the
block
door
it
should be
all out
closed. I don't know why the whole
and
door
go to
is not
sleep.
closed. Why is your door not
This
closed?
happened for another couple of weeks whenever I would stare at the door, so I tried my best to avoid doing so. Some time passed, and I managed to keep ignoring the doorway, and I was able to sleep better. I even thought that I would be able to go back into my room. I would just give it one more night in my parents' room, and then I would go back. That night, I again needed to turn over. I had fallen asleep on one of my arms, to the point where it lost blood pressure and had gone numb. So turning over in the bed took a bit more effort. I was about halfway over, facing down into my pillow,
Oh
when I
my
suddenly felt a
god.
hand. A large man-sized hand,
Of course, as
big
your
enough to
face
cover
into
the
the
back
pillow.
of my head, pushed me down into the pillow and held me there.
Oh my
I
god.
couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. And I couldn't push myself up. I felt like I was going to suffocate. In my head, I was screaming, begging for this hand to let me go. And after a few seconds, the hand let go and I could breathe again. I quickly turned to look, but of course, there was nothing there. I quickly woke up my mom and told her what happened. She could see how upset I was, so she held me until I calmed down. I don't remember seeing it again after that, and a year or so later, we moved to a flat that was downstairs, and I have never experienced anything like this again. It was only a couple of years ago, when I was talking about ghosts with my mother, that she remembered one night when we were living in the upstairs flat. She had fallen asleep on the sofa, which was against a wall. She had woken up and was about to head to the bedroom, when she suddenly felt someone's arms grab her and wrap themselves around her chest, making it hard for her to breathe. She could hear the sound of paper crinkling under her feet, and she barely managed to choke out a whispered, "Get off!" And then whatever it was let go. When my mom looked, of course, there was nothing there, and there was no paper. So she had no idea what had made that noise. She never experienced anything like that since we moved. I realize now that this may have been why she was trying to convince me that whatever I was seeing was a bad dream, or just my imagination. I think she believed me when I told her, and I had never felt more validated about what I experienced until right then. To this day, I still remember what that thing looked like, how it slowly moved into view, taunting me, because it knew how scared I was.
Never experienced anything like that, and God knows I don't want to. But yeah, I just never had anything like that happen. I can't even imagine what I would do with that. Like, scared
I am
me.
an
Finally, it's
immigrant
not
from
something paranormal.
Belarus. English is not my first language, so I apologize if I phrase things differently. Here's some backstory. I was only 11 when my family left the country after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
My father was involved with the Communist Party and would frequently visit Moscow when I was a boy. I don't know all the details. I don't even know what exactly my father's role was in the USSR. But from what I understand,
I remember this
we were
story,
granted
but I
asylum in the United States and
This
had to
sounds
flee
familiar.
Belarus in 1991. But that's not really why I'm writing this story. This is about something I saw in my childhood that has scarred me for life. This took place roughly a year before we left, so I'm guessing the year was 1990. My family, like many others, lived in a massive apartment building in Minsk. There were two other identical apartment buildings adjacent to ours, and directly behind the buildings was a playground area where I would play with my friends Sasha and Victor. Beyond the playground was a section of trees that separated a shopping plaza from the apartment grounds.
Sauce.
I remember that my mother was feeling ill and was bedridden, and my father was away on business in Moscow, so I was pretty much on my own that night. I remember that I had gotten bored watching TV in the living room and decided to go outside and see if any of my friends were at the playground.
But then they weren't.
I would say this was around 8 p.m., and
Yeah,
it was
I remember
dark
this
out.
story.
By then, most of the children
This
were
is just the animated
inside,
version, which is good.
and I don't even think anyone was allowed on the playground at that time, but I didn't care. There was no one around to tell me to go back inside, and I was pretty excited to have the playground all to myself. It was chilly out that night, but it was not snowing, so I figured that I would play on the slides and swing set until I either got bored or if security came along and told me to go back inside. So there I was, just swinging in the dark, when I heard something near the fence that separated the trees from the playground.
Like, how do you even feel okay? Like, how do you even, like, feel... Like, I would feel pretty, like...
There was a strange noise, like someone was sawing wood, but there was something off about it.
It was sawing an arm off. That's
I
what
ignored
remember.
the sound, but it became louder as time passed, to the point where I became curious as to what was causing this strange noise. There were no lights at the playground itself, but there were lights mounted to the back of the apartment buildings that illuminated things just enough to where you could see your surroundings. But the trees beyond the fence were pitch black. I got off the swing set and approached the edge of the playground.
I'm gonna approach it like an idiot when you could be going inside.
Louder, even as I got up right to the fence. It wasn't until I let out a curious "hello?" that the noise ceased. I stood there staring into the dark trees,
And then an arm was
waiting
thrown at
for a
you.
response, but all remained silent. After about another minute passed, I innocently asked, "Why are you chopping down trees in the dark?" I then heard a shuffling from within the trees,
He's chopping an arm
and
off.
soon I saw a dark figure come into view, but did not step out from the tree line. What happened next is something that still makes me want to vomit out my insides. The dark figure then threw something. The object flew over the fence and hit me directly in the chest. I was knocked backwards, more out of surprise than the actual force of the impact. "Hey, why'd you do that?" I shouted, but before I could get another word out, I caught a glimpse of what had been thrown at me.
It's a Freaking arm,
A
man.
severed human arm is lying on the ground in front of me.
I'd be freaking
I
going apeshit at
screamed
this
at the
point.
top
I'd
of
be
my
totally...
lungs and ran back towards the apartment, bawling my eyes
I
out.
know, you finally leave.
I stormed into our apartment and sat on the living room couch to collect myself. I did think about waking my sick mother and telling her about what happened, but decided against it. To give you some perspective, my mother grew up in Siberia, and she could be quite ruthless at times. Not only would she not be too happy about being woken up, but she most likely wouldn't believe my story. And I probably wouldn't be able to sit down for a week if she found out I left the apartment alone after dark. So I kept this incident to myself. As a child, I understood that what happened was scary, but I had no grasp of the implications. I thought there was a monster in the woods who ate people who came out after dark. Now that I'm an adult, there are some things that I've come to realize. For our remaining time in Belarus, I never saw or heard any kind of investigation regarding a missing person or a mutilated body being discovered, which is nothing out of the ordinary living in Soviet society. The monster in the woods, hiding in the trees that night, was most likely a sadistic madman, dismembering a human body with a hacksaw. There is one more thing that I should mention. For the rest of the time that we lived there, I cannot for the life of me recall ever seeing my friend Sasha again after that night.
It was her arm. Yeah, I believe I saw an animated story, like, I heard the story before, and I believe this was the same animated story. It just wasn't by IMR Scary Tales, because I have not seen this video, like this whole video as a whole. So it had to be also animated by somebody else that I also watched. I don't know what it was called, but I definitely do remember hearing the story, and I swear to God it was an animation. Wasn't it? I don't know. Whatever it was, I definitely heard that story before, which is why I wasn't like reacting that much to it, because I knew from the beginning, I was like, this is deja vu, I remember this. But... So obviously the whole, like, I don't know if I really believe in the whole paranormal thing, but again, knock on wood, because I don't want to say anything, and then I'll have to tell you guys in a story, oh yeah, look, I have my own horror story, because I was stupid and said, oh yeah, there's no paranormal, and then guess what, and then something paranormal happens. I don't need that to happen to me, so I'll pass on that. But definitely be cautious of what, like, I don't know, like, be cautious of what's going on around you. That goes for anything, obviously just being normally, like, generally safe, and just being aware of your surroundings. But, like, I don't know, if stuff is going around, like, creepy in your house, like, I would kind of think that maybe it's just, like, it could be just your imagination, like, you know what I mean? Like, anytime I wake up, there's a doll over there that I mentioned to you guys in past videos. There's a dresser, like, a dresser that's kind of, like, about taller than, no, I'm taller than it, right? Like, I'm taller than it, right? Yes, I'm a little bit taller than that dresser. And I'm, like, 5'8", so maybe it's, like, 5'6", I don't know. And then there's like a doll on top of it, which it's never moved its head toward me or anything, nothing paranormal like that. But it was my sister's, I don't know why she has that in body, it was from her godmother years ago. And it's never moved or anything. Like, it's always been like that, it never moved or anything. Like, when I'm lying here on this bed, that's just like where I look, because like I can like wake up and then I kind of look, and then I'm like, oh my God, what is that dark figure in my closet? But it's just that. It's just the dresser, which is black, not black, but it's like brown, but of course in the dark it just looks black with that head. They're kind of like outlining, kind of like a triangle in a sense. Well, like from this direction, it's literally a triangle. But because the doll's wearing a dress. There's a camera while there's something. But yeah, so it's just that I'll wake up and then like think that's a person, but it's not, right? Anyways, it definitely could be something that's true. Like, it obviously could be paranormal, but I just don't think that's the case. It could be, of course, but like, what do I know? I just don't think that's real, but I'm not going to say anything because, you know, anything could happen to me, right? So, don't want to say anything, but anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Please be sure to subscribe if you're new. Be sure to comment down below on anything you guys saw in this video. Please be sure to let me know if you guys think it was paranormal. What do you guys think it was? And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in this video. And don't forget to turn on post notifications as well. See you guys in this video. Peace out.